The first Hellblade game felt like a breath of fresh air within the genre of cinematic adventure titles like Uncharted or the God of War reboot. Not a popular opinion, but I'm one of those people bothered by what's called ludonarrative dissonance, which means it feels schizophrenic when a cinematic game tries to portray characters as lovable heroes, but at the same time relies on arcadey killing spree gameplay. Hellblade didn't fall into this trap at all, being a journey through a tormented psyche of the Celtic warrior Senua, where it was never quite clear whether it was inner demons you fought or real mythological monsters, almost like Nordic Silent Hill. The biggest shortcoming being its simple gameplay nature. Some people criticized the combat, but the bigger bummer for me was the sections between. It had unique gameplay mechanics which would trick the player's perception of the game world, very much in tune with its themes of mental unease. But many challenges would practically solve themselves, with the biggest hurdles being annoying pixel hunt puzzles for which you had to meticulously scan your surroundings for abstract symbols. So while the atmosphere and concepts were all on the right path, gameplay needed some fine-tuning to really hit a home run. The sequel Senua's Saga Hellblade 2 on the surface upped the ante quite a bit. While the original Hellblade was a mid-budget game, successfully portraying itself on par with more expensive games of this kind, the sequel, as a Microsoft-funded project, is much more bombastic in showing off its production values. Yet despite being what feels like a much bigger production, it's also a game that stays true to its vision. Hellblade 1 was an intimate journey, with no other characters than Senua traversing a deserted land to save the soul of her dead lover, constantly being confronted by the voices in her head, supposed to portray real mental disorder.
No, this is it.
The setting in the sequel opens up to even bigger themes. Senua now escaping slave owners in war-torn Iceland. What now looms above this plot even more is physical violence, through the still twisted perception of Senua. The game uses its production values to oppress you with intimidating and surrealistic cinematography, immersive sound design, visceral battles and brutality, which isn't sugar-coated by gamey mechanics but only heightened by the surreal imagery stemming from Senua's mind. Now, Hellblade 2 is not free of cliches, actually more so than the previous game, since Senua is now part of a Giant Slayer group, which leads to a couple of tried power of friendship moments and to a more generic and kind of rushed conclusion, not to mention slightly less ambiguous world building. But as a traditionally told story, it's hard to argue that it doesn't stand heads and shoulders above your average cinematic adventure game. A kind of obvious comparison would be the God of War reboot, just for the fact that it also takes place in Northern mythology and tries to say something about violence and is presented as a one-shot. Yet when playing Hellblade 2, God of War feels almost goofy in comparison, to make myself unpopular again. While God of War featured very entertaining arcade action, much deeper than Hellblade, its overly serious story themes felt tacked on, and cutscenes of dying dogs and a weeping Kratos like cheap emotional manipulation. In comparison, many parts of Hellblade 2 enshroud you in terror. Despite being a big budget Xbox game, it actually tries to convey misery, often like a horror game, not casual gaming spectacle. Yet despite trying to find new ways of storytelling, it doesn't do so for the gameplay. On the one hand, I appreciate its immersive approach for gameplay that features zero tutorials or UI elements, in an era where many games go way overboard with this stuff. It also correlates well with the story elements, as the voices in Senua's head can break the fourth wall to guide the player.
Focus.
Which is why I would slightly push against criticism of the combat not being flashy enough. It does exactly what it needs to do to convey the atmosphere. Investigation has actually improved a little too. While the symbol hunts are back, they're easier to comprehend, and ordinary puzzles, which play with the shape of the level design, become a little more engaging. Not too hard, but at least they feel like real mechanics now. However, and that's the biggest shortcoming, there's a much higher amount of non-interactivity. Sections that play themselves at much more drawn out walking simulator parts. Even though none of them might be pre-rendered cutscenes, you might at some point just hold the stick forward for like 10 or 20 minutes with no meaningful game interactions. In a game that's already only 6 to 7 hours long. The original was about the same but still had more set pieces and even a little more combat variety. While a more fun hack and slay time like in God of War would have undermined the story themes, ultimately this still is a game. It needs interaction. When it comes to atmosphere, Hellblade 2, like its predecessor, hits all the right notes to potentially leave a mark on the genre. Even with a weaker mythology than before, there's really nothing like its immersive mixture of surrealistic horror and medieval legends. But also just like the predecessor, it undermines its biggest potential of greatness by not approaching its own medium enough.